Hi friends, this is Ray from Honeytop Bees. Did you know that we can really mess up a damaree split? Yeah, we can. And you know how I know? Because I've done it and I still might do it again. Today I want to share some of the things that I've learned from my own experience about how I can make a damaree split fail by my own actions or inactions. And maybe you have some additional things that you would like to add. Put them down in the comments below. Let's jump in and look at some of these together. In my last video, I showed you how to make a damaree split, and this was my example that I had as we walked through some of the principles of a damaree split. If you didn't get to see that video, I encourage you to go back and look at that first. It will lay a good foundation for some of the nuances that I'm going to talk about today. And by the way, take a moment and hit like and subscribe if you would like to. I would love to have you be a part of our community here on a regular basis. Today I want to talk about some reasons why damaree splits can fail. It's going to just be some things that I have learned that I think are just really important. And the first one is definitely this one right here. Timing. Timing on the damaree split is so crucial. Now, let's talk about the two ways we can get it wrong. Number one, if we do it too early, here's what will happen. If our brood box has not gotten all the way filled up on the bottom, and we get too anxious, and the queen's only laid up 1 or 2 frames, and we take one of those 2 frames and move it up to the top and put one down at the bottom, and we don't have a big enough workforce inside of the hive because we're starting the damaree split too early before the first round of brood has even gotten to hatch, there can be insufficient bees to be able to support the whole damaree split, especially when it comes to thermoregulation inside of the hive, temperature control. That can lead to your brood getting chilled. So you can't start your damaree split too early. I know sometimes in the spring, we've been waiting all winter, and we're just like, oh yes, I can't wait, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do the damaree split, and I'm gonna get it right, and we can get kind of anxious, and we have a warm day, and we go out and we split our hive, and then all of a sudden we realize, uh-oh, it's a little too early, and snow starts falling, and we've really messed things up. So one danger we can have is being too early. The other one, though, is probably the bigger factor, and that is we can be too late. Here's a key number to remember. The number is this, 42. 42. What is the number 42? Well, we all know that from an egg to a time a bee hatches is 21 days. It's about another 21 days from the time that bee hatches until that bee actually becomes a foraging bee. And so that's a total of 42 days. What we want to do is we want to have the maximum workforce at the time of the height of the nectar flow. So whatever your area of the country is, if your nectar flow, for example, around here, we hit the height of our nectar flow mid-April, that means that I want to have my damaree splits well underway around March 1st, because 42, 45 days later, in mid-April, I want to have a massive workforce. If I wait until I'm too late and do my damaree split, say, in April or May, those bees aren't going to be ready to be foraging bees until the beginning of June. And at least in my area of the country, most of the nectar flow is over in the beginning of June, and over the summer we have a thing here in the South called the summer dearth. I never had it when I kept bees in Vermont, but it's a thing down here where there's less resources coming into the hive than the bees are actually consuming. So we have negative resources going into the hive, and so we call that the summer dearth. If I start my damaree split too late in the year, then it's going to be ineffective. All I'm going to be doing is creating a huge beehive here with nothing for them to forage on. Then I'm going to end up having to feed my bees. So the first thing that we need to try to get right is timing. How do you get the timing right? Well, one way I mentioned, you can count back from your nectar flow. The other thing is you can make sure that you're really stimulating your queen to be laying as early as possible coming out of winter, so that you can have control over the timing because there's plenty of brood inside of the box. You're not waiting for the queen to obtain resources from the environment to start building up, because if you do that, by the time those resources come in and she starts laying and you count those 42 days, it's over. You're too late, and then you've messed up. So what I like to do, sorry, I got bees and gnats around me. What I like to do is I like to make sure that I'm feeding my bees fondant over the winter, and then sugar water as soon as the temperature gets above 55 degrees, so that that queen is going to be stimulated to be laying. Incoming nectar or nectar substitute, sugar water, stimulates the queen to lay. So I do that as soon as possible in February, so that on March 1st, I've got plenty of brood, maybe even a lot of brood starting to hatch that I can move around and manipulate inside of my hive. So the first thing that can really go wrong is timing. The second thing that can go wrong with a Demaree split is really out of our control, and it's weather-related issues. So there's a couple of things that can happen here. Number one, if you have a poor nectar flow in a particular year, and there's insufficient resources, your Demaree split, it's not going to make any difference how many bees you have in the hive. If there's not nectar in the environment, if it gets washed away, if you go through a dry period, if things just don't work out for a particular year, then you're going to, doesn't matter how big your beehive is, it's just not going to be effective for you. Chilled brood can be a real concern when it comes to the Demaree split. You've got to have a sufficient population inside of your hive to keep the queen and whatever she's laying in the bottom warm, and then also at the top. Of course, this heat here is going to rise to the top. That's why I suggest you make sure you don't have much ventilation at the top, so all that heat can stay inside of here. But if you have cold conditions that happen like late spring, to where the bees can't keep everything at that optimal 90 to 95 degree temperature, then you're going to have chilled brood, and that's going to really set you back, and your Demaree split can fail. So second thing is going to be all kind of weather-related issues why a Demaree split may not work out for you. Let's move on to the next one. The third thing that can go wrong are things related to the queen. So number one, if you didn't get your queen in the bottom box for some reason, if you had a hole in your queen excluder and she got above that bottom box, those kind of things can happen, and your Demaree split is going to be rendered less effective if that happens. If you didn't go back after 5 or 6 days and you get all the queen cells out, or this is more common, you got all the queen cells out, but you missed one. That's happened to me. And all of a sudden now you've got a virgin queen running around here in the top. Now this hive at the top very well may want to swarm because they have a queen in the bottom, they have 2 queens, they're thinking, hey, 2 queens, we're ready to swarm, and then it's going to swarm anyway. If you do a Demaree split too late and your hive is already committed to swarming and they're already building swarm cells, that can be another problem for you. So there's a lot of issues related to the queen that can cause our Demaree splits to be set back or even to fail. Another queen-related issue that I want to mention as well is if your queen is too old and she comes out of winter and she doesn't have a good laying pattern and she's not strong enough to be able to really lay up a lot of brood, then that can be another issue. So I like to start preparing for my Demaree splits actually in the summer prior to, so that I have a new queen coming into the fall, a brand new queen, and so that when she's coming into the spring, this is her first spring of laying, that provides the maximum number of eggs that you can possibly have inside of your hive, which will really help build up that population inside of your colony. Another thing that can happen with a Demaree split is this. If the queen doesn't have a sufficient number of nurse bees here in the bottom box with her, it can really inhibit her from being able to lay. She doesn't sense that there's enough help down here to feed all of those eggs and feed all of that young larva, then she either won't lay or the worker bees can come behind her and go ahead and eat up those eggs because they don't sense like there's enough help. This is why some people will leave 2 frames of brood in the bottom so that it draws all of those nurse bees down there as opposed to 1. Part of that is going to be related to your climate and to the temperature that is in your area, but that's something to keep an eye on. It's kind of hard to get a grasp and to tell you exactly what to do. I have been successful personally with just putting 1 frame of brood in the bottom and moving all the rest of the frames of brood up to the top, but some people like to put 2. The other thing I guess I should note here is that I use 8 frame equipment. I don't use 10 frame equipment. So I have to make this effective as possible for me. I have less frames to work with. I think if I had 10 frames, leaving 2 in the bottom would be just fine. Why your Demaree split may not be as effective as you want it to be is comb. You can put the queen in the bottom with all foundation, By foundation, I mean there's no drawn comb on those foundations. You can do that. In the spring, the wax glands of the bees are very active. They tend to build up comb pretty quickly. However, just think about it in terms of this, that the process, if you put the queen in the bottom with all foundations that are not drawn out with any comb on them, then all of the resources of the bees are going to be focused on drawing out that comb so that she can have a place to lay. That can take 2 weeks, 3 weeks for her to have a whole box that's laid out and available for her to lay. You've just missed 3 weeks of brood rearing that you would have been able to have otherwise. So I have found that one of the keys to successful damaree splits is to give the damaree split as much drawn comb as you have. That includes the bottom box where the queen is going to be laying, these middle supers that we're going to be filling up with honey, making sure that all of that comb is available for the bees. So if I only have a certain amount of drawn comb, I'm going to give it to my damaree splits first, and then I'm going to let my new hives, my splits, whatever, be building up the comb for the new year. This is something I found is a real key. You're going to be more successful if you use drawn comb in your damaree splits. At least in my experience, that's what I've found out. Then the last thing is space. As this top box hatches out, this bottom box fills back up with brood. You might repeat it. You might move this brood back up to the top, put the empty frames back down on the bottom, or you might just put another empty deep on the bottom and just put these 2 deeps on the top. You're going to have to continue to add honey supers here in the middle. As this colony fills up with bees in the spring, using the damaree method, you're going to find that they're going to run out of space quickly. And so it's very, very important for you to be maintaining your damaree split and going in, I like to say, every 7 days at the most, making sure that you don't need to add another honey super in the middle, making sure there's no queen cells on the top, making sure the queen still has plenty of place to lay on the bottom. Those are the 3 keys when it comes to space. You'll be surprised at how quickly this hive can fill up, and space issues can be another reason why your damaree split will fail. And by fail, I mean it's probably going to lead it to want to swarm because it feels like it's completely out of space. Now, if you've been beekeeping for any amount of time, and if you've done damaree splits, I bet you have some comments that you can share about some things that you have learned the hard way maybe about why your damaree split maybe wasn't as successful as you would like it to be. That's really what I'd love for you to put down in the comments. What are some lessons that you've learned? How do you do your damaree splits? Do you do them differently than I do? Maybe I have some tips that I can learn from you. And so would you take a moment and share some of those down in the comments below and let us know what you have found to be successful, or maybe more importantly, what you have found to not be successful when it comes to damaree splits. And one thing that can be super helpful when you're making comments is tell us what part of the country you are in, because it makes a huge difference. If you're in northern New York State and summer is a 75-degree day for you, it's very different than where summer can be a 100-degree day here in the southeast. So temperature is such a big factor with damaree splits because we're doing them in early spring. So if you found some things that work or don't work for you, include where you're from, because that factor can really determine a lot of the context of how you do your damaree splits. Thanks for joining me today. This is Ray. I hope you'd hit like and subscribe to my channel. God bless, and I'll catch you on the next video.